Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Knapik. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Knapik, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Knapik is on right now.
And welcome to the show, everyone. Successful Living with Bill Knapik, and today with the one and only Mr. Stuart Woods, best-selling author supreme. In fact, his book, Scandalous Behavior, is #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list right now. And he has had one book after the other on that list and more through the years. He is the creator of Stone Barrington and other great characters. Go to stuartwoods.com for all his books and more. Stuart, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bill. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I have to tell you, I've been reading your books, I guess, for 30 years. One of the first ones that comes to mind was Dead in the Water, where I was introduced to your great character, Stone Barrington.
Yes.
And that is so awesome. And you've written so many Stone Barrington novels since then, right?
Yes, this is number 36, I think.
36. It
My
is.
statistician informs me.
That's right. Well, you have so many books out there, Stuart, and it's so awesome to have you on the show. Thank you again.
Thank you. I'm delighted to tell you that the book is #1 on both the New York Times bestseller list and the USA Today list.
And that is now that the book is Scandalous Behavior, your newest book.
Yes.
That is so great. How do you, and one of the things that I consider when I read your books, you always have a great plot, the characters are so good, but one of the things that I think about is, especially with Stone Barrington, you put so much detail in that just what he does day to day and throughout the plot of the book is so exciting and interesting, and the detail comes right through.
Well, thank you.
How do you do that?
Well, he leads a very detailed life. All I have to do is describe it.
And indeed you do. And even when he just goes shopping or when he has his meals, to me that is so distinctive and makes it so interesting for the reader.
Well, I want to make it as real as possible for the reader, and I think that helps.
Indeed. Now, Stuart, tell us, what was the first book, the first Stone Barrington book that you wrote?
The first one was called New York Dead.
So
that was more years ago than I care to think about. At that time, Stone was still on the NYPD as a homicide detective, although before the book is out, he's an attorney.
That's right. Now, to even create the character Stone Barrington, what was your inspiration and how did he evolve in the first book?
Well, I'll tell you how that happened. I had read a piece in the New York Times about how cats can fall from a great height and land on concrete and not be killed, maybe injured, but not killed. And the way they do that is they assume what's called the flying squirrel position, spread eagled, and they present the maximum amount of their body surface to the wind, and that slows down their terminal velocity, which you will remember from high school physics.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a human being who falls would reach a terminal velocity of 120 miles an hour. A cat would hit about half of that and would be falling more slowly and therefore would survive. So I thought, what if a woman, a beautiful woman, maybe a famous beautiful woman, fell from a great height and she'd had some skydiving experience and she assumed the spread eagle position, and maybe she's wearing a nightgown that slows her down a little bit, and maybe she falls into a pile of dirt left there by the public utility. Would she have a chance of surviving? And I needed a character to witness that event and to solve the mystery surrounding it. And so I invented Stone Barrington just on the fly.
Wow. And he indeed is a great character, but not only that, the characters that you have throughout all the books, and it's interesting, like I'm even thinking about Holly Barker. When Holly Barker, you had her stand alone on a few books, but also she enters and is weaved into Stone's world too. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, she's an important part of Stone's life, and so she does pop up every now and then. In fact, when my publisher told me that he wanted me to do 4 books a year and he wanted them all to be Stone Barrington books, I tricked him by bringing in all the other characters from the other books, and he said he didn't mind being tricked that way, so it worked out okay.
And as we talked about originally, we talk about the description, the great detail, and your descriptive writing is just tremendous. But I think one of the things that's happened in reading, and I want to hear what your take is, and that is, unlike the movies or a TV show, the book is so beautiful because what happens in that comes from your mind, the writer, and it comes into our mind's eye. So we see these characters. We see Holly Barker. We see Stone Barrington with our own eye. That just makes it fascinating.
Well, I try and let the reader fill in on a lot of the detail. I'm really a minimalist as a writer, and I don't spend a lot of time on elaborate descriptions. I think if I give the reader just enough to fire his imagination, then he'll fill in the blanks.
And you're certainly doing that, indeed. In fact, I love the Holly Barker, but going back to Dead in the Water, I think that was the one where Stone's on a boat, and he has his love interest at the time was going to join him, but she never did because she went with another guy.
Yep.
But Stone is so resilient, no big deal. Here comes another opportunity and another adventure.
Well, that particular incident changed his life because, unbeknownst to Stone, he doesn't discover this until later, the old girlfriend is pregnant when she goes off with the other guy. So that brings up a whole new series of plot twists in the coming books.
Well, Stuart, how long does it take when you plan, let's say, first of all, to plan a new book, how long does it take to plan the book, and then how long does it take to write one of your books?
Well, I don't plan it. I improvise it. I start with a scene that leads me to another scene. Then I review the previous day's work and make small corrections. That catapults me into the next scene. And I keep inventing scenes and chapters until I reach about chapter 50. And then I start looking for a way out of the corner I painted myself into. And so far, I've always found a way out.
Yeah, you certainly have. Now, how long do you plan a certain amount of time for your
Well, it took
publishing?
me 8 years to write my first book, but that was a very bad case of first novelist writer's block. After that, I began to pick up the pace, and I began writing a book every other year. And in the beginning, I worked about 4 hours a day to write a chapter, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. And as I moved along and gained experience and confidence is very important, I began working a little faster without really trying. And I cut that down to 3 hours and then 2 hours a day. And I had been writing a book every other year, and then I had a revelation that if I wrote a book every year, that I would be paid twice as much, or at least twice as often, which was almost as good. And I suggested to my publisher that I write a book every year, and then I suggested 2 books a year, and my publisher balked at that. He said, if you write more than 1 book a year, people will stop reading your books. They'll get tired of you. And I said, is that what happened to Danielle Steele and Stephen King and Joyce Carol Oates? And he said, well, those are all exceptions. So at that point, I told my agent to find me another publisher, and we found Putnam, who were happy to have 2 books a year. And at the time that I like to travel, which is in the spring and autumn, because my wife and I fly ourselves in a light jet, and we like to have the best weather that we can for those trips. So after a while, my publisher took me to lunch one day, and he said, would you consider writing a 3rd book every year? And I said, yes.
Wow.
And that worked out very well. And then finally he suggested a 4th book. And now I'm writing 4 books a year. It takes me about 2 months. I write every day, 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., 1 hour, and I write a chapter during that time. And when I get 60 chapters or so, I've got a book.
Wow. You fly planes, right, Stuart?
Right, we do.
Well, in going to the character Teddy Fay, now one of the things about Teddy, and I think the thing that's exciting about him is that for a while there, he was changing his identity. He had his plane, he'd put different numbers on it, but it's like here's a guy that knew when to get out, and he had that down to a science. That too is a fascinating character.
Well, Teddy was a fugitive for many years, and then something happened in his life that changed that. I don't want to let the readers know too much. They should discover that in the books. And he is able to settle down with one identity in one very attractive place.
But he also, I loved how he had that down to an art. When it was time for him to leave as that fugitive, he had it down and he was gone.
He was always ready. He had a plan.
Well, and the other thing I think about too, as I know that you're an aviator, sometimes I and maybe other readers do this too, but they see you and they imagine what your life is like, and some people probably see you as Stone Barrington out there.
I'm afraid a great many people do, but Stone is taller, handsomer, and luckier than I am.
Well, I'm reading the book right now, Foreign Affairs. I think I have about 80 pages. I'm reading that. That is also a great book, and I mean, he always has exciting adventures everywhere he goes.
Yes. Well, it wouldn't be good for either me or the readers if his adventures weren't exciting.
One of the things, do people ever ask you how old is Stone Barrington at this point?
Well, he was in his late 30s when the series began, but now he's in his early 40s, and he's going to remain right there.
So it's kind of like dialing back the odometer on our car.
Right.
That is great.
His age is frozen in time.
Now, that is great. One of the things, too, I like that you, and I think you filled in the blanks for me a little bit in that you say you write minimalistically so that when I read those words, to me, they're so descriptive, and then I take what I read there, and I guess I add so much to it and digest and consume it so much that it's so exciting to read, and it just keeps the pages turning.
Well, that's what I aim for.
Now, when you started go back before your first book, when did you know in life that you wanted to be an author, Stuart?
Oh, I think when I was 9 or 10. When I was about 10, I was rummaging in a closet in my grandmother's house, and I discovered in a shoebox full of old photographs and things a policeman's badge that was half shot away with buckshot and still had some dried blood on it. And then I took it to the only adult in the house at the time. It was my great-aunt Ruby, and she explained to me that it had belonged to my maternal grandfather, who had been a cotton farmer in Georgia in the 19-teens and had lost his farm to the boll weevil, like many others. And through a personal contact with a friend, he got a job as the first chief of police in a small southern town. It was only a few years old at that time. And eventually he was killed in the line of duty, and she told me that story, and it stuck in my mind. And then from that time on, I always thought about writing a book about that, and that's what my first novel was about.
Wow, that's right. I could remember the cover of that with the police badge on it, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, one of the things when we talk about covers, how important, I know I look at the covers and they draw me in, and I'm sure they draw other people in, but as the author, do you even think about what the cover's going to look like, or do you have input into that?
Well, the publisher, or my editor rather, always writes to me and asks me if I have any suggestions, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I just tell them to have the designer read the book and think of something, and I have a contractual approval over those covers, so sometimes I accept them, and sometimes I make requests for changes, and sometimes I reject them and tell them to start over. And finally, when everybody's happy, then that's the cover.
Right. Now, also, one of the things, as people think about the Stone Barrington character, at least when I do, one of the things that's great is the love interest he has as he goes along, but also he eats some great food, and he's accustomed to a super lifestyle.
Well, the two go hand in hand to Stone. Over dinner is a great place to get to know a woman, so that works out very well.
And right, that's right. The dinner, and like the books start out.
Elaine's late. That worked right up until the time when Elaine died, and then I had to stop saying that because the restaurant closed about 6 months later.
Right. But once again, I have to say, people probably see Stone Barrington and Stuart Woods sometimes as, but I'm sure you like to have good food, right, Stuart?
Absolutely.
Give the listeners also an idea what lies ahead. Say, the book right now, your newest book is Scandalous Behavior. So tell us what lies ahead after that book, Stuart.
Well, I think the next one after that must be Family Jewels, and tomorrow I'll finish the book after that, which is called Dishonorable Intentions. So right now I publish in January, April, July, and October is the way it's been working out. And that will continue, so there will be a constant supply of books to read.
Now, when you take that hour per day and write consistently every day, and I guess that means every day, right? Saturday, Sunday, the whole
It does,
thing.
yeah, 7 days a week.
Is the discipline that's involved, and what kind? Do you have to have a certain atmosphere? Do you sit at a computer, the same place all the time? What happens?
All I need is an hour of solitude and a computer and reasonable quiet in the house. So I live in 3 places, and I eventually write something in all of them.
So there you go. Having that quiet time is very important. So you have it down to an art and a science, and boy, you are so gifted, Mr. Woods. I know people out there are listening, and they say, "Man, we got to hear Stuart Woods today on the radio show talk about
That's very kind of you.
His characters." And
I'd like them to know that the book "Scandalous Behavior" is in the bookstores as we speak, and it's number 1 on the bestseller list. And I hope that everybody will go in and buy a copy.
Indeed. Now, let me ask you this. When a book is number 1, that has to be just such a great feeling. And after writing so many books, do you still get super excited about it?
Yes, I'm always pleased when they come out. And this is, it took me 15 novels before I made the bestseller list, but since that time, I've had 47 uninterrupted bestsellers without a break. And that pleases me very much.
That is very exciting. And I think also to know, certainly the success that you've enjoyed, but also to know the difference in people's lives that you make when they read their books.
Well, that's what they tell me when I get emails from them, and I'm always pleased to hear that.
Well, when you get the feedback, and that, I guess with the internet and emails and things, that's how I reached out to you. But when you get that feedback, what are the things that people want to know the most, or do you hear a consistent theme there?
Well, when I first started the website, which is 20 years ago, I discovered that people tended to ask the same questions. So what I asked people to do, as I think I gave them a month, was to send me all the questions that they would like to know answers to. And then I made a list of those, and I composed an interview for the website, which consisted of the questions that people answered. And that way I don't have to repeatedly answer the same questions over and over again.
And that's great. And also, we want to tell people, stuartwoods.com is the website. They can go to that beautiful website. You can see all the books there. And just Google Stuart Woods if you don't get that. Just stuartwoods.com. It is
that works.
Now, also, tell us a little bit about Holly Barker.
Holly is now the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States after a career first in the Army, and then as a police officer, and then in the CIA. And she leads an extremely interesting life. And she's very busy. She doesn't have as much time for Stone as she used to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, I think one of the books, I don't know if it was her first appearance, I think it was Orchid Beach. I kind of remember something about that with a bag of money in the tree or something.
That was in one of the books, yes.
Orchid Beach, and then there was a scene with her in the bank, and her boyfriend, I think, got shot.
Right, and Stone Barrington happened to be in the bank on that occasion, and they met shortly after that.
And boy, once again, I go back to thinking about Stone Barrington, all the characters, and the visual that you create with the words that you put on the page. It's magnificent, it's exciting. And I mean, do you get the excitement as you sit back and let's take that hour per day? Do you review right when you're finished at the end of the hour, or do you look at it the next day?
I look at it the next day. I let it cool off a bit, and then I make nearly always small changes. Occasionally, I'll add a paragraph.
You probably get this question a lot. If there's someone out there, young or old, that wants to be an author, I know it's at the end of your books, but if someone wants to be an author, what is the best advice that you'd give somebody?
My advice is to write something. It's amazing how many people who want to be writers forget to do that. They dream about having bestsellers and films made and so forth. But you really have to sit down, apply your bottom to the chair, and write something, and then it can begin.
That's right. Well, boy, encourage people to get Scandalous Behavior. It's out right now. Also, you can get that on the iBooks as well, right, Stuart?
Right.
So that's also a great way. Now, let me ask you this: when you read a book, do you, as a writer, do you have time to read other books?
I read mostly history and biography. And I don't read in my own genre at all because I'm very impressionable. I think it would be a terrible thing to even inadvertently steal somebody else's idea, and it would be even worse to get caught doing it. So I avoid reading my own genre.
Right. And also, as you travel, I guess you would take notes as you're traveling and apply some of those things to the books?
I don't take notes, so I have a good memory, and my theory is that if I can remember something, it's worth using, and if I forget it, it probably wasn't worth using.
That's right. Boy, in fact, some of the things I've mentioned about previous older books, you remember all those parts about it. So that's fascinating. Now, are there going to be any books anytime soon that are not Stone Barrington books?
Well, it will always say a Stone Barrington novel on the cover, but it will always contain other characters from my past books as well. Ed Eagle, Will and Kate Lee, Holly Barker, a whole list of people.
Mr. Woods, what else would you like to tell the listeners here in Houston and those that listen on the Internet?
Well, next time I'm in Houston, come out to the bookstore and get a copy signed. I won't make the spring tour in Houston, but maybe in the fall.
Well, we would love that. And also, on your website, you do show where you are touring and where you're going to be, right?
I do.
Well, we will look forward to that. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Stuart Woods. Mr. Woods, thank you so much. You have a great fan right here, and all the listeners that are out there, I think you do as well. Once again, the bestseller right now on the New York Times is Scandalous Behavior. Stuart Woods. Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Bill. It was fun.
Very nice. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
And I want to say thank you, not just to Stuart Woods for being on the show today, but thank you, Katie Grinch, for setting up this interview with Mr. Woods. She is with Putnam Publishers. Katie, a big thank you from Houston, Texas. Thank you so much. And I picked up my copy of Scandalous Behavior, so I encourage you to do the same and pick up any and all Stuart Woods books. Until next week, Successful Living with Bill Knapik and Stuart Woods today. Until next week, thanks for listening.